I think three things. Number one is thinking incredibly long term, right? So the decisions that my parents or my grandparents made are thinking long term. They made sacrifices for many years so that there could be benefit for both themselves and for their kids, me and my brother.
Right.
Um, Number two, physical discomfort just doesn't bother me as a consequence. It's kind of built into me. Like it's hot, it's cold outside. It doesn't matter. There's a bus I took once in India when I was in my 20s, and there wasn't a seat, so I just lay down on the dashboard of the truck of this bus for like a 3-hour journey through the desert, and it's fine, right? So physical discomfort, I think, matters less to me. When the AC is broken here, my wife, she's from Vermont. I think it's a little bit
Mhm.
tougher for her if the AC.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stephenson, the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where our goal is to empower you to live your best audacious life ever. Each and every week, we dive into conversation, inspire, motivate, and challenge you to live your best life ever. It's always a pleasure to be here with you, and I truly appreciate you spending time out of your day to join us on this journey. Now, today we have a remarkable guest whose story serves as a powerful reminder of resilience and the values of long-term thinking. Nick Jain is the CEO of IdeaScale, and his story embodies the immigrant spirit that drives home the importance of hard work and perseverance. His journey reminds us of a seed planted in the garden. While it may take time to grow and flourish, with the right environment, care, and nurturing, it can yield incredible results. Just like Nick learned to think long-term thinking during his formative years, we too can cultivate a mindset geared towards growth and success. In our conversation, we explore the transformative power of AI as a long-term tool for both individuals and organizations, enhancing efficiency and decision-making processes. Nick emphasized the need for organizations to foster a culture that encourages innovation through inclusivity, proper incentives, and the right technology. We discuss the importance of maintaining the idea meritocracy, where every voice matters, regardless of your rank, and how innovation should be viewed as a process essential for societal advancement and organizational survival. Nick really is a great guy. Again, as I mentioned, he's the CEO of IdeaScale. It's the largest innovation software company on the planet, with over 15 years of experience in the industry. Nick has led organizations through pivotal transformations, focusing on fostering innovation and the collaborative problem-solving approach that he takes. His diverse background, rooted in both Canada and India, has shaped his understanding of the immigrant experience and instilled in him the values that drive his leadership today. His background and expertise in AI and technology make him an incredibly relevant guest for this episode. His insights shed light on how individuals and organizations can navigate the complexities of modern challenges through a lens of creativity and adaptability. So now that we've got you all set, let's turn to our conversation with Nick. Enjoy. Hey, Nick, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate you for making the time to be here, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Audley. Really excited to be here this morning.
Yeah, I know this is awesome to get in these conversations around different ways people can build and develop their audacious spirit, and we really encourage it here on this podcast. And certainly, you have a story, which we'll get into yours in terms of just a bit of a rags to riches story, so to speak. But in terms of overcoming challenges and obstacles, we're on this path. I believe that we're on an individual pathway, and on our journey, we're going to run into obstacles or setbacks or hurdles or pitfalls. And it's really incumbent on us to sort of continue to push through those, because I really believe that on the other side of that adversity and that not so fun stuff is where our greatness lies. And so it's really about continuing to push ahead, encouraging individuals that there's reason to keep going. And so, certainly, that's part of your story, as well as you play a lot in the AI space and innovation. Your company's IdeaScale. So there's a lot that fits into what we do here on this podcast. So maybe as a starting point, Nick, I can get you to sort of open up here and let our audience know who you are and what's gotten you to the point that you're at now.
Sure. So I'm Nick. I'm the CEO of IdeaScale. We are the largest innovation software company on the planet. Been around 15 years, about 100 people spread across 8 countries. Our customers are huge government agencies, huge corporations, nonprofits. So Doctors Without Borders, Pfizer, Comcast, U.S. Post Office, City, Mississauga, for your Canadian audience, like
There you
lots of
go.
people all over the world.
Yeah.
Lots of organizations, I should say. And our software just helps them innovate. As for me personally, I grew up in a mix of Canada and India, although I've been in the United States now for 20 years, which is where I went to college and business school. First 10 years of my career, I was in Wall Street. Last 5 or 6 years of my career, I have been a professional CEO that either private equity firms, venture capital firms, or founders hire when they are ready to hire a professional CEO to take their company to the next level.
Mhm.
I live in Philadelphia with my wife and 2 cats and have a kid coming in, my first kid coming in about 2 weeks now.
Well, congratulations. That's a big deal. You got a lot going on.
Yeah, it's a busy life.
Oh, for sure. So maybe we can get into I'm big on origin story. I was a comic book kid. As a kid, I was a fan of comic books, and I always loved the origin stories, right? Like you probably weren't bitten by a radioactive spider, but you more than likely had a period of adversity to get you to where you're at now. What if you can share with that?
Yeah, so I have a kind of a weird immigrant story. My folks immigrated from India to Canada in the 1980s. And this was an era where, like, it was really tough to meet immigrant. And they weren't, doctors or highly educated people showing up. They were just normal people. And back then, when you showed up from Asia, like it was really tough in Canada. So they had a kid and they realized they can't afford to take care of a kid. So they made this incredibly difficult decision that I cannot fully appreciate. They sent me across the world to go live with my grandmother in India. So from the age of 1 to 5, I grew up in India in a small, like tier 2, tier 3 city. And I remember I had 1 hour running water in the morning, 1 hour at
Wow.
night, and it was my job as like a 3-year-old to go fill the water tank when the water was running. Electricity went on and off. And then at age 5, once my parents were a little bit more established, I came back to Canada to live with them. Around when kindergarten started, because that way they don't have to pay for childcare in the middle of the day. Um, and the rest of my childhood was a pretty normal middle class childhood in Canada. So that's my origin story, kind of a tough immigrant. Well, my parents made difficult immigrant decisions
Sure.
that tremendously was a sacrifice that set me up for success throughout life. So I'm deeply appreciative of that. And obviously my grandmother for raising me for many, many years.
Right. I would imagine at such a young age, there's some sort of lessons of that you would take with you. I mean, having minimum running water and living that lifestyle. There's an appreciation to sort of where you're at now, but also some lessons on and that you can take with you throughout life. Did anything stands out for you?
I think three things. Number one is thinking incredibly long term, right? So the decisions that my parents or my grandparents made are thinking long term. They made sacrifices for many years so that there could be benefit for both themselves and for their kids, me and my brother.
Right.
Um, Number two, physical discomfort just doesn't bother me as a consequence. It's kind of built into me. Like it's hot, it's cold outside. It doesn't matter. There's a bus I took once in India when I was in my 20s, and there wasn't a seat, so I just lay down on the dashboard of the truck of this bus for like a 3-hour journey through the desert, and it's fine, right? So physical discomfort, I think, matters less to me. When the AC is broken here, my wife, she's from Vermont. I think it's a little bit
Mhm.
tougher for her if the AC is
Right.
broken. Life continues on.
Right. Right.
Um, and third is this notion of just hard work. I think this is very classic for many immigrants. They understand that, look, you may not be born with, the name Rockefeller or be a billionaire, or have
Hmm.
relationships that get you jobs and stuff. So you just grind. So there's this immigrant mentality, which again, many immigrants from many parts of the world have, which when life hits you with challenges, you just work through it because you absolutely have to. You have no other choice. And that's certainly, bred into me at this point or
Gotcha. No,
habituated.
No, I've got this image of you lying across the dashboard there. It's kind of cool. But to your point, it really like I'm hearing adaptability as an example, right? And how and being flexible and that's a life lesson that we can take with us in all aspects, regardless of what whether personal or professional. And so hearing that is fantastic. So let's sort of continue the story here. So you're back in Canada. You're getting your education. You're reunited with your parents. What was the idea, or when did the idea develop that you were going to head in the business direction?
Sure. So, really late in college, honestly. So throughout my, high school years, throughout my college years, I was showing, if you asked me, I said, hey, I'm going to go get a PhD in physics and I'm going to go become a scientist. And
Okay.
that's what I actually studied and did a bunch of research in college too. But I kind of realized two things about myself in college. Number one, I'm a massive extrovert. And number two, I like to see results sooner rather than later.
Gotcha.
And, so, again, I'm deeply kind of scientific in nature. It's still the way my brain works. All my buddies ended up being, professors somewhere. But I said, look, I want to see results faster. The business world, like stuff happens fast. You don't run an experiment for 10 or 20 years. You have to run an experiment now. You got to figure out if it worked at the end of the week. And then
Right.
if it didn't, do something different, or if it worked, you do more of it. And it's obviously the business world requires a lot more of the people skills and human interaction skills than I think pure academic study did. So it was really during college that I pivoted from pursuing a career in academia, in scientific academia, to the business world.
Gotcha. You landed in the innovation space ultimately, and I know there's probably a lot that happened before you got there, but I wonder if you sort of talk about landing where you did.
Sure. So about 2 years ago, I got a really cool call that said, "Hey, Nick, do you want to come be CEO of IdeaScale?" And this was such an awesome opportunity for kind of three reasons, or maybe two and a half reasons. Number one, it's the half reason. It's always fun to be CEO. I had been co-CEO a couple of times, but it's fun to have that title and job and responsibility. Number two is what IdeaScale does is it solves a problem that has like pissed me off throughout my career, which is if you're a junior guy, or if you're sitting in the non-headquarters office and you're far away from the CEO, nobody cares about your ideas. There's no way, even if they care, there's no way for you to get that idea from you to someone who can do anything about it, right? Because it's really, in most organizations, it's the senior people's voices who matter, and they get to come up with all the ideas, and sometimes their ideas are crappy, and that's just
Mhm.
the way organizations run. And IdeaScale solves that problem because it separates the idea from the individual, so it makes it more of an idea meritocracy. And so I really like the product of what they're doing. Um, Number three, it was a really cool opportunity. IdeaScale was at a pivotal moment. Here's a company that had been around for 13 years at that point, pretty successful.
Mhm.
And the mandate from the board to me was, okay, Nick, your job is to go take IdeaScale from a North America-based company, make it global, make it a $1 billion company. And that's such a fun challenge, both from a kind of organizational growth perspective, but also from this is going to be a really fun challenge, and I get to make an impact on the world of innovation and software globally, and that's a really cool, cool but daunting challenge.
I mean, keeping the theme of this podcast, I would say that's a very audacious goal, to be quite frank. I mean, for them to come to you with that, but I just love the manner in which you embrace it. So for example, you talked about you got this call and you say, "This is cool. I'll be a CEO of a company." It's like that approach. I think is in anything that we are encountered with or offered or presented with is such a fabulous one to take. I remember so once upon a time I was a commissioner of a Canadian basketball league, NBL Canada, and very similar to your story, I got a call from the president of the board of directors and said, "Hey, Audley, we want you to do this." And when I think now, I mean, I'm here, I'm Mr. Audacious. I'm going, hey, be audacious, be audacious. And they came with this idea, and I was like, oh no, right? Like, and I sort of recoiled, and I remember, it was a Friday. I got this phone call, and I said, let me get the weekend to think about it. And the moment I hung up, I said, what are you doing? Like, what are you thinking about? Like, these opportunities don't just come up like every day, and so why wouldn't you take it? And that's where that boldness and having that courage to jump into things when you can't see the steps in front of you, you sort of take that leap anyways. So I'm just kind of curious, was there anything like that for you? Because when you tell a story, it's like, man, he was all in, ready to go. But was there any sort of doubts or suspicions when you first present the opportunity?
I think there were kind of two, not suspicions, self-doubts, I should say, self-doubts, not doubts about the organization, because the company was legitimate, it had been around. I had no doubts about that. Look, two things that I was kind of just a little bit uncomfortable with at a personal level. Number one is I'd spent a bunch of time being a software investor, so I understood how software companies worked. When I was at Bain Capital, big private equity firm investing in these big multi-billion-dollar technology companies. So I understood how investing in software had worked, but I'd never directly worked at a software company. I'd never directly been an engineer. I've coded a bit, but I've never
Right.
sat down and built big, large-scale engineering projects. Number one. Number two was operationally, IdeaScale was a globally remote first team, and it's been so even since before COVID. It's had for the last 15 years, it's just had people spread around the world. So that was obviously a pretty innovative business model 15 years ago. Now it's more and more common. But now, sitting in the East Coast of the United States, managing a global team,
Mhm.
who are kind of doing different things. We have, lots of different chunks of the business. Managing that is more complex than, let's say, the prior company I'd run, which everybody was based in either Los Angeles or New York, and you went and visited them once a month, right? It was
Right.
very easy,
Right.
and everybody was doing one thing. At IdeaScale, we have a lot of things going on. We have a software team building code. We have a government sales team that's talking to big government organizations. We have a consulting team that is providing more kind of qualitative, non-software advice. And these are multiple chunks of a business that it's a lot more complex. Like IdeaScale's it's a lot more complex than some of the organizations I've run previously. Even some organizations that were, 100 times IdeaScale size were in many ways less complex. And that is, it's a little bit scary
Mhm.
as somebody for
Mhm.
me, right?
Right, 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 right. No, yeah, and I think as you describe it, I mean, these are natural feelings that we have. But to be able to step forward is really what I commend you with, Nick, for sure, because it's not always easy, and you just presented some things that could have made anyone run, right? Because you've never been in that space, and you absolutely did that. Let's talk specifically about innovation, and maybe like maybe you can describe, why is innovation even important to us as not just individuals, but even just society in general?
Sure. I'll say kind of two things. Firstly, let's just define innovation. People think of innovation as an output. It is the iPhone, it is the wheel, it is a rocket ship. Innovation is, in fact, the process that leads to those outputs. I want to make that's an
Yeah,
important kind of distinction that
very,
people
very important. Yes.
screw like. Innovation is what Apple does. It is not the iPhone. And I say this as an Android user, right? um, okay, so why is innovation important? At two levels. As a social level, if we're not innovating as a society, we're dying, right? Like if we had not been in, think of civilizations throughout the last, 10,000 years of human history. If they didn't evolve, they kept up. They got conquered. They died due to, climate change, catastrophe, Pompeii, you name it. If you're not advancing as a society, you're basically regressing. That's true.
Mhm.
That's number one, just very practically. If you're not advancing to meet the needs of tomorrow, you won't be around tomorrow.
Right, right.
Secondly, at a philosophical level, it gives meaning to our lives as individuals and people. If we're just waking up doing this exact same thing every day, that's kind of a boring, like not meaningful
Mm,
life, right? You want to
mm,
advance in whatever field of life. That could be your spiritual life, that could be your family life. Most people find meaning, and there's some great, philosophical, some philosophers have written some great stuff about this. If you're
yeah,
not getting better, you're kind of like not giving meaning to your life on, to your 80 odd years on this earth.
yes, yeah.
And that you can scale that up at an organizational level too. If I'll offer one last thing, at an organizational level, let's imagine you're a big corporation or government agency. I often say, like, if you're not innovating, just remember your competitors are, right? If you are not
Mm,
coming up with new technologies or new software, improving your manufacturing processes, you're falling behind because your competitors are not sitting still.
right, right, right. And then when you think about, so you're talking about the existing competitors, but new businesses coming into the market, they're starting from that place that is already ahead of you if you're not innovating. So you're already kind of behind. So it's the existing competitors that you know about who are also, you guys are watching each other going, what are they doing? What are we doing? Kind of thing. But then there's new companies, organizations that are coming into the play and thinking that they've got their niche and maybe even capitalizing a little bit on your space too. So it's this constant, it's like the antenna has always got to be up, so to speak.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm also so glad that you referenced the organizational component, right? So obviously, this is a self-development podcast, and we encourage individuals to things that they can do for their own lives. And absolutely, if you're not improving every day, if you're not practicing, for example, you think in the sports context, then you're not getting better. And again, in basketball, you think of the great Kobe Bryants of the world, who's these iconic stories of him practicing, right after losing in the NBA finals, and he's out practicing the next morning, like trying to constantly get better. And I think that really is a key point. How does creativity work in this? So I wonder if is there a distinction between creativity and innovation? Could you make that distinction?
Sure. Creativity is a part of innovation. I
Okay.
would say it's the kind of first and middle parts. Innovation ultimately, does have to drive change. Creativity by itself, right? You can be the most creative person in the world. You can be the most creative artist, but if you don't put pen to paper and
Right.
actually create your art and then let that art percolate through through society, then you haven't innovated, right? Picasso, if he did not draw his various shapes, and I'm not an art guy, but if he didn't innovate, right? Like, it didn't matter
Mm-hmm.
how genius, how much genius was in his head. So creativity is the first part of
Mm-hmm.
innovation, or the first through middle parts, where you come up with ideas, you iterate on ideas, and that can be true at an individual level or at a team level, right? Teams can be creative. Um, and creativity is kind of important. If you actually look at the research, people think of creativity as just the spark of genius that people are born with. That is not what creativity actually is. Creativity, that's a kind of thing that we believe cartoons tell us, the storybooks tell us.
Right.
Creativity is actually this really fascinating phenomenon where an individual takes other things that they have seen or experienced through their life and just combines them in different ways. So imagine you have flour, sugar, salt, and water sitting on your cooking table. You can combine that in six different ways. And so what creativity is someone who just says, look, I'm going to try to mix two things that have already existed, right? When somebody
Right.
invented the wheel, they saw a circle somewhere in life and they said, hey, what if we apply this in a different context? So creativity is both a learnable skill, but importantly, it is not some like random thing that happens. It's just the more experiences you have in life, the more ingredients you have to mix in different ways to generate kind of new ideas, new opportunities.
And I think the example of the wheel is a perfect one. Like it just sort of builds on, and you look at all the different ways the wheel is used. But we're able to do that because you're building on something that's already been done. So I think it's a perfect example of that. So, and this could be from whether it be an organizational perspective, an individual perspective, if innovation isn't part of your makeup, isn't what you do, and for some it comes easier than others, right? I totally will acknowledge that. And if so, but if you're that person that doesn't have that company where you're not traditionally innovative, how do you start that? How do you build that? How do you get it going?
Sure. At an individual level, the answer is really easy. Go learn a new skill. That new skill could be playing basketball, learning how to code, reading Moby Dick, whatever it is, right? Go learn a
Yep.
new skill. At an organizational level, the answer is a lot harder. Firstly, if you're not innovating as an organization, you're screwed. You're going to die eventually, right?
Right.
Like, someone is going to outcompete you. And that can be if you're a small, family-run restaurant and you're not coming up with new recipes and dishes. Remember, there's like 80,000 other restaurants in your city or town that
Sure.
are, right? So you're going to lose customers over time. Um, but and that's also true, obviously, for giant corporations. So kind of two things. Number one, you have to be innovative. If you're not, you're just dying. It's a stupid decision not to be innovative.
Hmm.
The good news is there's also a recipe for being innovative at an organizational level. And this is kind of our area of expertise. This is what we do. So there's three things, what I call the three-legged stool, or three things that you need to be innovative as an organization.
Okay.
Number one, you need people who actually want to do new things, right? Not everybody, candidly, is motivated enough, or maybe they've been broken so much by everyone calling their idea stupid that they don't want to innovate. So number one, you need some kind of fresh blood, or people who want to innovate, who want to do new things. That's number one. Number two, you need the right processes and incentives for them to innovate. So imagine you take the most creative person, but you tell them, hey, every time you come up with a new idea, I'm going to slap you. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to stop coming up with new ideas pretty fast.
Right.
And that's actually what a lot of organizations do. They say, sit down, do your job. We don't want to hear your new stuff. So, and when you do come up with new stuff, they steal your idea and make $1 billion, and you get, a pat on the back. So you actually have to create positive incentives for people to innovate, and also stop penalizing them, stop slapping them, metaphorically
Right.
speaking.
Right.
And number three, you need the right technology and resources. So, and this is obviously specifically where IdeaScale plays, but the analogy is, let's imagine you have a great athlete. He or she wants to become a great athlete. They're motivated. They want to go win a gold medal, but you don't give them a pair of sneakers and a coach. Wouldn't it be they can still do it, but it's a lot harder if they're running around barefoot outside on a track. Wouldn't it be a lot easier if you gave them some technology, in this case, shoes and access to gym, right? And the same is true at an organizational level, that a lot of organizations try and innovate, but they just they hire one or two people and say, go sit in a dark room by yourself and come up with ideas. And that's pretty hard. Give them like pen, paper, 50 years ago, it would have been give them pen, paper, and some wallpaper to, draw on. In the modern day, you need to give them tools and technology, like particularly software, because software is, everywhere nowadays. As it should be, by the way.
Yeah, no, you're right. And as you describe, and I love the three-legged stool analogy, so thank you for that. But as you're describing the different parts of it, it screams to me that we're talking about building cultures. It's not a person that's being innovative, it's a culture. And again, and this is in the organizational sense that we're talking about, that it has to be ingrained in terms of, this is what we do, as opposed to that's that person's job, right? It's two entirely different things.
So yeah, that is an ideal, right? That is sometimes difficult to achieve in practice. You can't, it is really difficult. Like if you have 100,000 person organization, not everyone is going to show up to work wanting to do creative thing, right? If you go look at an assembly line at a factory, there may be 1,000 folks working there. 10 of them want to do cool stuff, and 990 of them just want to show up and, they'll come up with ideas once in a while, like something annoys them and they're like, how to fix it. But most of them just want to show up, do their work, and go home. So you can't necessarily make everybody innovative, because not everybody's brain is wired to be innovative, and that's okay, right? Not everybody's brain is wired to be a great basketball player. I'm terrible at basketball, can't shoot, and no matter how much training you give me, no matter how much coaching you give me, I'm never going to be a great basketball player. So it's like, it would be ideal to make everyone innovative in an organization. In practice, that is pretty much impossible. So what you should do is create centers of excellence or parts of your organization that are specifically designed to be innovative. So there's kind of two or three things that some organizations have done. Number one, some just have R&D organizations, and that's really easy if you are, let's say, a pharmaceutical company. Pharmaceutical companies live and breathe based on, coming up with new drugs. But most, let's say manufacturing organizations, somebody who's manufacturing washers, does often not have an R, and I don't mean washers as in washer dryer. I mean like those little circular rings that go on screws, right? They usually don't have an R&D department, because they're like, look, we just punch little circles out of steel. That's good. So having an R&D department is common in some types of organizations. In others, they have, in technology companies, they have product teams whose sole job is to come up with new products. But again, that's, an industry specific thing. For organizations that don't naturally have an R&D or product department, what they've really started doing over the last 10 years is creating innovation departments and chief innovation officers. If you look back at the 1990s, the term chief innovation officer didn't exist. And then you started looking at around 2005, a lot of organizations looked around and said, hey, we're not actually innovating. We're just doing the same thing over and over, and we are getting outcompeted by our neighbor, our competitor across the street or across the world. How do we fix this? Let's make it someone's job to actually make sure we are innovating. And so a lot of organizations started creating this chief innovation officer role. I think it's about 10% of the Fortune 500 now, and about a third or a quarter of major US government agencies, and growing, because this is like a job to solve a real problem that a lot of organizations aren't, innovating.
I wonder too, and I know earlier reference rewarding or incentivizing innovation. Is that how effective is that? Because in terms of getting, because you are right, you can't make everyone in an organization suddenly become innovative overnight, and it takes some. It's a process, and as you said, there's some who want to do it. But rewarding and incentivizing, is that a good strategy? You think?
Well, again, let's go back to the analogy of let's imagine you create negative incentives for innovation, where if
Hmm.
every time someone comes up with a new idea, you slap them. Okay. And metaphorically, this is what most organizations do. They ask you to show up to work, grind out your Excel model, or run your shift at the factory, do your forklift thing, and keep your head down. Don't talk, right? Just do your job, go home.
Right.
Um, and if you take time off your job to like go solve a problem, you'll be like, why weren't you moving boxes or writing Excel models or writing code? So they penalize you, they slap you. You get passed over for promotions and raises. So that's
Yep.
what exists in many, many organizations. And that's really bad for innovation because you're metaphorically slapping everybody when they try and do something cool for your organization, which is actually really good for your organization.
Mm.
So that's the situation many organizations live in. And if you agree with me that, every time if you slap someone, they're going to stop doing what caused them to be slapped, it's very Pavlovian dog type of situation.
Right.
Um,
Right.
then the alternative must be better. And the alternative is do two things. Number one, stop slapping people when they are doing creative things, right? And number two, reward them when they do creative things, right? And give them what I would call a disproportionate share of success. Right now, if you come up with $1 billion idea for your employer, you'll get $1,000 bonus and a pat on the back and maybe a small promotion. They stole your idea and they make $1 billion. That's why people go form startups. They leave big corporations because they're like, I'd rather make $1 billion for myself than for, my XYZ employer. Um,
Mhm.
Give them a crazy share, like make it exciting for them, that give them that $10 million bonus or whatever. Uh, it sounds crazy, but remember the alternative is all your great ideas leaving to go start up startups, and and then they become your competitors tomorrow, right?
Mm.
A
Mm.
lot of organizations really struggle with this because they're like, hey, why would we ever give a junior employee like a $5 million bonus, right? Well, because that's more than our CEO makes. Well, because that guy or gal is going to go be your competitor tomorrow and take all his or her great ideas with them, and that's
Gotcha.
worse for your organization.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And in the long run, it is very impactful in a negative way. I'm curious. So when IdeaScale approached you and said, "Hey, we've got this cool opportunity," where were they from on the innovation chart? Was that something that had to be introduced, or was that something that already existed? Wanted to get a sense.
Sure. So I think showing up to IdeaScale, there were some things that we did well as an organization, as innovation, and some things that we did less well.
Hmm.
We had people, so we all worked in the innovation industry, and there were many of us who were really excited about innovation.
Okay.
But the things that we, I think, did poorly were there were not everyone, it wasn't inclusive in innovation. So many of my colleagues, we have a huge team based in Asia, and they felt they were a satellite office rather than part of the organization. And so
Gotcha.
that's important because it was a huge portion of our engineering team, some of our product folks. And we're a software company. You want your engineers, your product people to like contribute. So I think the big change is that we were pretty well run, but not best in class in terms of our own internal innovation. And we made kind of two or three changes over the past 2 years. Number one is we've made it very obvious that everyone's voice matters, right? Junior, senior, every voice is on an equal base. So when I submit an idea for improving our product, it doesn't matter that it came from Nick, the CEO, versus Joey, the junior analyst.
Right.
We're evaluating those ideas on its merit. And if Joey's idea gets downvoted and hated, and Nick's gets upvoted, that's great. And if the opposite happens too, that's
Sure.
okay too. So there's some ideas I've submitted that the company hates, and we don't do them, even though I'm the CEO, and that's
Right.
okay.
Right.
It's really funny. I mean, imagine it's probably not funny, but like in a good way for a junior person to realize, hey, their idea it was better than the CEO's, and that's what's getting done. It's motivating. That again,
That's
that positive
awesome.
incentive.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, Second, it was funny, like we've become much more aggressive users of our own software over the past 2 years to make that more possible because we do have a distributed team, right? We're not a $1 billion organization yet. We don't have 10,000 employees, but we actually still struggle with those same problems of like, how do we make innovation inclusive,
Mm.
accessible, and meritocratic? And we started using our software much more aggressively. So about 90% of our software development process for the new features we build are ideas contributed by our customers, our employees, anybody on a public forum,
Right.
ideas.ideascale.com. Anyone in the world can come contribute. Hey, here's how you make your software greater or better. And they can also comment on and vote on other people's ideas and say that these are great ideas or terrible. Um, and then finally, we've changed the incentive system where people are much more rewarded for contributing to the organization's goals rather than just sitting down and showing up to work. I think that
Mm.
we've changed the compensation schemes a little bit, the titling, the responsibilities to make sure that everyone is aligned to what matters for the organization, which is, making a better product, keeping our customers happy, retaining our
Yes.
customers.
I mean, all of those things just make for a more dynamic organization. As you described, I'm like, yeah, absolutely, and that's sort of you want. I think that when you're dynamic, I think you're at the edge of innovation. Like because the two work hand in hand with each other. Um, I'd be remiss if we didn't get into a conversation about AI. It's almost a very big part of our lives now. Whether we want to accept it or not, there are those who are still pushing back against it because they're not sure, and they think they're thinking of the Terminator movie and Schwarzenegger's going to take over the world, and those thoughts are out there. But in seriousness, I do think that there's opportunities if embraced, and I think embracing innovation, embracing the disruptions because you have to disrupt to innovate, and so being able to embrace that is important. I wonder if you could get your thoughts on I guess AI and how it's helping us get better.
Sure. So, firstly, whether we like AI or not, it's here. The genie's out of the bottle. And candidly, AI does a lot of things extraordinarily well. And tomorrow it will do even more things better than it did,
Right.
yesterday. And, people think of AI as just coming out recently with ChatGPT. AI in some way, shape, or form has been around since the 1960s. What's just happened is there's been more and more technology and better algorithms. So the AI has gotten smarter. It went from like a first grade tool in the 1960s to maybe eighth grade 10 years ago. Now it's in college. It actually just probably finished its graduate degree about a month ago when ChatGPT Strawberry came out.
Mm,
So the genie's out of the bottle, and it is a really powerful tool, and it is powerful in kind of two ways, I would say. Number one, for either an organization or individual, it internally just helps you do things faster, right?
yeah.
So, for example, we are, as an organization, we're able to write all the text on marketing much better for emails, or just have, if I'm writing I was in a complex negotiation to acquire one of my competitors, and I wanted to be very delicate in the negotiation rather than aggressive. So I had it reworded because I think my emails were a little bit more, too aggressive and not nice.
Right. Right.
Um, and I also war gamed with it to practice, like, okay, these are going to be these tense live negotiations. Let's go war game. And it's fun to be able to do that with a person in real time. And I could be doing that, sitting on a beach somewhere.
Mm,
So that's at an organizational level. It's made things more efficiently. Also at a personal level, my wife's birthday was a week ago. I brainstormed with AI to come up with great ideas rather than just going to Etsy and looking up generic, what are the top 10 gifts for your wife, right?
right. Right.
That's at an
Which
organizational level.
and that's a form of AI as well, is it not? When you talk about the top 10 gifts, that's a form of it. The suggestive
Well,
technology.
the way that if you just search, pre these generative AI models, if you search gifts for my wife,
Yeah.
that's not AI. That's basically just a simple sorting algorithm. You
Okay.
could, in
Okay.
theory, do that with a piece of paper if you really wanted to.
Got you.
Um,
Got you.
right? In fact, Google's original algorithm was basically, could be done on a piece of paper for small enough, if the internet was small. Um,
Uh,
and we had to do it in college at some point. Um, but okay, so that's number one. It just makes things
yeah.
more. There's a lot of things that AI can just do for you today that are
Hmm.
easy, from automating emails to creating videos to create.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've seen amazing graphics with things like Midjourney or diffusion models,
Hmm.
coming up with gifts for my wife, whatever, right? Or husband, whatever, depending. If you're married to a woman. The second is. Um, what it means for software companies specifically. So we're a software company. We make
Yeah.
software.
Yeah.
AI is now increasingly going to be a core part of how almost every software company operates. Because if you think about it, software does three things. Number one, it takes in some data.
Hmm.
Number two, it allows the user to interact with that data. And number three, number one, it takes in data. Number two, it shows you data. Number three, it conducts analysis.
Yeah.
Okay. Any type of software, whether you're talking Microsoft Excel, Google Word, your book reader on your phone, whatever, your music play app. It's, your Spotify's taking in music, it's showing you a bunch of music, and then it's analyzing patterns in your music. That's all software does that.
Gotcha.
What AI does is something really cool where it can now analyze information that was impossible to analyze, as recently as 5 or 10 years ago. Because really that's what human beings have struggled with. We have all this information in front of us. What does it mean, right? I have 10,000 songs, which are good songs. The good news is Spotify's algorithm and Netflix's algorithm figure out which are movies you're going to like, because it's poured through all that crazy data, the thousands or tens of thousands of movies around the world, and said, hey, Audley, you're not a Korean, you don't look like a Korean guy, but this movie from Korea or the Squid Games is going to be awesome for you. Even though you may have never seen a subtitled, Asian TV series in your life, the algorithm figured out that's good. And that's the area where like AI is now going to show up in almost every form of software, because it's going to do that third part of software much better than the average human being can, which is the analysis of information. As an example, practically from us, like, most of the data in our software is qualitative. It's not numbers that you can add, subtract, multiply. It's like, here's an idea for a new software feature. Here's an idea for a new marketing campaign. How do you compare those? Those are qualitatively two fundamental things that you can't just add those two things together or multiply them or divide them. To figure out which idea is worth doing, you actually require human intellect. But now AI can do 80 or 90% of that human computation, or that qualitative computation, which is so incredibly powerful, because much of the information in our world is qualitative. Adding numbers is easy. Adding ideas or qualitative information is really complex, but now we're starting to be able to do it.
Got you. And it's funny because as you describing it, and I think by and large, I think people understand, right, that how the benefits and where it can go and how easier it can make things in our lives, and writing emails and ideas that the people would get together in brainstorm groups, would come together, a group of people have to come up, ask AI, it'll give you all that kind of stuff. So it's good. It's a shift in thinking, and I think in mindset that will allow you to embrace it. I think is a difference maker for many. And much like the Nike slogan, just do it. I think you just have to go and just use it, right, and interact with it to help sort of that understanding of the benefits.
Well, so I go a level further. So if I think back to when I was in school, I learned how to spell and grammar, and I learned cursive writing, right? Because those useful skills, because back then spell check wasn't actually that great. I remember Microsoft spell check, would come out, constantly complain about spellings and stuff because it wasn't that smart 25 years ago. Yes. And so for folks like, me, who had learned a certain skill set in school of writing and cursive and spelling, we have to, as you said, I just have to go try and use AI and integrate it as a new skill I need to develop. But for the next generation of folks, that is a more valuable skill for them than, candidly, this is a bit controversial, but I don't think kids need to learn how to spell anymore. I candidly don't think they need to learn anything basic grammar. They definitely don't need cursive, because who writes in cursive anymore? Those are dead skills. Some old English teacher's probably turning over in their grave, but I don't think people need to know how to spell anymore. What is important is, can they communicate the subject of what they are talking about, regardless of if they're communicating in Chinese or English or bad spelling? That doesn't matter. What matters is the information, and much more valuable is these AI natives that are growing up. We grew up as probably internet natives, but there's this next generation of kids that will grow up as AI natives as a core part of of the tool set and skill set that they learn, which is so cool.
Yeah, very, very cool. And I think as kids are growing up with it, and it's it's going to come to a point where it's just a natural part of their upbringing.
It's like that baby, that viral video of the baby trying to scroll on a book. I don't know if you've ever seen that, because they just grew up on touch screens, right? Not realizing that, many of us still had computers where we had to physically scroll down with the scroll bar rather than just do this.
Or how about a book with actual pages, right? Like, I mean, that's
So I went my wife hates me for this, but I went about 15 years ago. I went 100% digital with books. I don't own any physical books. Any book I have is always on PDF or
yeah,
EPUB or some sort of e-reader,
yeah,
which is great because I can be on a flight and I can switch
yeah,
between a fantasy novel, some deep technical book,
yes,
or junk video,
yeah.
all on the same flight.
That's right. And never lose your place after remember where you left off at too.
Yes.
Awesome. And look, this is
Cross devices, right?
yeah,
I can be reading on a bus on my phone, and then later on the flight, it'll have synced to that same page,
yeah,
even if my phone is dead.
yeah. No, I think it's fabulous and a great way of maximizing and utilizing the tools that are out there and really embracing technology. Nick, this has been a great chat. I really, really appreciate this, and certainly your story for one, and your journey to where you are now, the stuff you're doing with IdeaScale, and how IdeaScale as an organization is looking to take over the world. Perhaps maybe that's the global sort of master plan. But really, when we talk about the piece around innovation, I think that's So at the end of these conversations, I always kind of walk away really thinking, oh wow, what Nick and I talked about this. For me, it's going to be that piece around innovation and how individuals, the embracing of it, if you will, and being able to understand the benefits, and obviously from an organizational standpoint, if you're not innovating, then you're not going to be around for very long. And so thank you for those insights. For our listeners that want to learn more about you or IdeaScale, where can we send them?
Sure. Two things. Our website is ideascale.com. Our software is completely free for organizations or teams less than 100 people. So whether you're an individual or your team of 99 people at billion-dollar corporations, software is completely free. Your data is yours. Takes 30 seconds to use. Would highly recommend people check it out. For getting in touch with me personally, best way is through LinkedIn. My name is Nick Jain. You see that at the bottom of your screen there. DM me on LinkedIn. Would love to hear from your audience.
That's awesome. And I wanted very quickly, I know you touched on the software, but so the average person that looking to interact or engage with some of the software, what kind of things are they getting into, or what's available to them?
Sure. So again, our software is completely free for that individual
Yep.
or average person. The software will help them do three things. Number one, it will be a place for them to put all of their own ideas. Instead of sticking on a Post-it note or an Excel file or a notepad, or a digital or otherwise, it's just a good place to put your notes in a visually appealing format that, think of it almost like TikTok or Instagram. It is organized really well. Number two, it allows people to share ideas. So if you and your buddies want to have an idea for a new app that you're developing,
Yep.
or restaurant ideas that you want to check out, so you can collaborate. And the number three is you can rank ideas very effectively, figure out which ideas are good or bad, upvote them, downvote them, the same way, again, you would on TikTok or Instagram.
Got you. Well, this is great. Thank you. We will make sure that the contact details are available in the show notes, and encourage listeners to engage, interact, and check out. Again, appreciate the insights, the information. And Nick, thank you for being a guest on the Audacious Living Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Audley. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Back, we are here on the podcast. Through our conversation with Nick, he shared the profound insights into the nature of innovation and its critical role in our lives. He challenged the common misconception that innovation is merely a result. Instead, he defined it as a process that requires intentionality and effort. I personally love how he emphasized the importance of a meritocratic approach to ideas where every individual's contribution is valued. This approach fosters a culture of creativity and openness, allowing organizations to thrive in an ever-evolving landscape. I believe that embracing that mindset can lead to profound changes in our personal lives and within our organizations, encouraging us to think boldly and act audaciously. I encourage you to connect with Nick directly. You can find more about him on LinkedIn, and then all the contact deals, of course, will be in the show notes below. Don't miss out on an opportunity to engage with his work and insights. I know as a special offer, IdeaScale, his company, provides free access to their software for organizations or teams with fewer than 100 people. This is a fantastic opportunity for those looking to harness the power of innovation in their projects. So be sure to check that out. It's a great deal, a great offer. So thank you for that, Nick. As well, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Audacious Living Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, follow, or share. Your support helps us grow and spread the message of living audaciously. Until next time, keep pushing forward, keep pushing boundaries, and living boldly. Be safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stephenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.